Morning, Bitcoiners. Good morning, Double B. Good morning, Visionaries. I like it. I like it. Good morning, Bon Matin. B for victory. DM Zatar. Peace. Peace indeed. Tom. Good morning, folks. Good morning. Good morning, P-Man Van. With a good morning, all. The highest IQ bunch. I think so. I think so. Good morning. Happy Monday. Do Bitcoin. We're doing all kinds of Bitcoin today. I'm actually early, Thomas says. Same as my Bitcoin purchases. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Where do I sat says, Bon matin à tous, mes hommes et mes femmes d'etat. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Indeed, everyone. Let me just confirm, right? It's a bit of a cloudy, kind of gray. It's getting dark in the mornings, but that's okay. The sun is totally up and Bitcoin is totally running. So all that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. This one's going to be a lot of fun this morning. It's the unfortunate memory in America. The whole world remembers it's 9/11, right? It's September 11th, 2023. Crazy. And as you'd expect, we have a lot of fake news Moscow time this morning, as you'd expect. It's been 22 years, I guess, 22 years since that unbelievable day. I remember everything I was doing that day, as many people do. Now let's see if Moscow time can remember, right? Let's see. This is from the New York Times, right? This was written this weekend. They asked this question seriously. This is the headline. Why is Joe Biden so unpopular? Why? Nobody knows. It's a big mystery. This one's pretty good. We got MSNBC columnists demanding Trump must die in prison to protect democracy, right? He's got to die, guys. It's what democracy needs, that Trump dies in prison. This one's pretty good, right? This is the scientists are at it again, all right? The scientists are back at it, right? People who trust their gut are suckers for bullshit conspiracy theories. Scientists, according to scientists, a review of 170 studies suggests people believe in conspiracy theories to fulfill motivational needs and make sense of distress. That's what it's all about, guys. You're just out there making sense of your distress, okay? The thermal expansion of the seventh tower is your distress, okay? This one's from Time, all right? The anti-vax movement isn't going away. We must adapt to it. All right? Well, maybe. Who knows? So that's what I got for Moscow time today. But, oh, no, I got one more. This one's pretty good. This is from the UN. They released a statement today. The window to reach climate goals rapidly closing. And here's their tweet that goes along with it. The window of opportunity to ensure a livable and sustainable future is rapidly closing, warns the United Nations. A transformational change and renewed commitments to climate action are needed to limit global temperature rise. I'm surprised they didn't just come right out and say that it's all up to you. You got to do more. It's your fault. You got to do more. The UN's got to come up with it. But that'd be too close to personal responsibility. So I guess that's why they don't want to do it. So an amazing thing happened this weekend, as everyone is becoming much more aware, right? I think that's the main thing. Awareness is just going through the roof amongst Bitcoiners, amongst a lot of people, right? Bitcoiners, I would say, are some of the most media literate people in the world. That's why we have such a great crew here in the morning, right? I think you guys are usually ahead of the news and remain ahead most of the time. Now, I've been talking about Rob Reiner for a little while, right? You know, Rob Reiner. Rob Reiner, to this day, his one of the movies he made, Stand By Me. I've mentioned it many times on this show. Close the window. Oh yeah. Sorry. It's a different window. Hasn't that window been closing for 20 years? Yeah, it's just always closed. So Rob Reiner actually created one of my favorite movies of all time, and I think I mentioned it last week because his movie Stand By Me is actually set on Labor Day weekend. And I used to regularly watch it on Labor Day weekend because I loved that movie so much. It's about four young boys. It's a Stephen King novel, right? It's a Stephen King novel. And he wrote it under a pen name, named Richard Bachman. It was part of a separate series of books. So he wrote this thing, Stand By Me. It was actually called The Body. If you ever want to read the book, it's called The Body, written by Richard Bachman, who is really Stephen King. So Rob Reiner tweeted this weekend the following, right? And it's unbelievable when you read it, but I'm going to break down what's going on with it because there was an amazing investigation, let's say, into Rob Reiner this weekend that I didn't even know about. But it kind of proves what we all know. So here's what it is. He wrote the following tweet. Hard reality. For our democracy to survive, two things have to happen. Donald Trump needs to be convicted for January 6th, and there can be no third-party candidate. Now, this just lit everyone's brain on fire, right? Imagine someone comes out and said, for democracy, we need the other guy to be in jail, and we need no RFK Jr. That's what he's saying here, right? He's saying there can be no third-party candidate because this happens just as RFK is starting to make noise that he's being so unfairly treated by the Democrat National Party that he's got to run a third-party candidacy. Now, of course, most people can do the basic math here. If he runs as a Kennedy Democrat in the independent column, he's going to strip away so many votes from Biden that Trump would win easily with 30 or 40%. He wouldn't need 50 anymore. He'd be right in the realm of victory. It looks a lot like what happened with Clinton in the 1992 election when you had Ross Perot running and he split the Republican vote because he was like a quasi-Republican and he drained so many votes from George Bush Sr. that it allowed Clinton to win with only 40% or something, right? So Clinton's first victory only came with like 40%. There were still a bunch of Americans who hated the guy and it didn't matter because he only needed 40-something% to be president and win the Electoral College. So remember what he said, right? This Rob Reiner tweet. For our democracy to survive, two things have to happen, right? Donald Trump convicted and no RFK, right? So first of all, it's an insane tweet. It sounds crazy, right? That your democracy is going to be saved if you get rid of a Kennedy and if you put your guy in jail. But this fella here, Mike Benz, right? If you want to follow him, he's a great follow. Mike Benz Cyber, right? So he's sort of an independent investigative journalist. He went down the Rob Reiner rabbit hole. It's amazing. It's amazing. So check this out. So Rob Reiner has a board, right? And this board, let me find out what it's called exactly. It's the Foundation for Freedom Online, right? It's the Foundation for Freedom Online. I think that's what it's called. And the Foundation for Freedom Online, turns out on his own board of directors, he's got 4. So Mike Benz made a mistake. At first, he said he has 3 former CIA directors as on his advisory board, right? He had 3, but then he realized, oh no, it's actually 4. It's Leon Panetta as well. He goes, whoops, I missed it. He's only got 4 CIA directors on his board, right? So he comes out and says who they are. Leon Panetta, 2, it's 4 CIA chiefs all huddled around little old Rob Reiner with his talents in ... Hollywood production. There's so many CIA chiefs around him, you can literally just miss some. This guy throws a Malibu pool party, and you need a national security clearance to go in. So you got James Clapper, you got Michael Hayden, you got Michael Morell, and you've got Leon Panetta, right? So all of these guys sit on the same board together. So Rob Reiner making these movies, right? Just making some movies with a bit of CIA help. Now, one of the things that got this guy, Mike Benz, curious about this is the following, right? It's the actual way they tweet. It's the way he comes out and says, now remember, I've played around the idea that he's an entertainer and he's doing, like he's playing a character when he's tweeting these things, right? That it's so insane and that he says things that lights people on fire that it's almost in the same realm as Trump, in the sense that Trump is very good at lighting your brain on fire. And he picks a way of framing things and wording things that gets maximum attention, right? So when you see Rob Reiner come out and also is able to angle for maximum attention with the majority of people going, oh, he's so stupid. What's he talking about? Oh my God, right? Which is kind of what we're doing here. But Mike Benz went a little further and he looked into it, right? So Trump has his way of doing it, which is usually to get Trump what he wants, right? But what happened here? So Mike Benz breaks it down. And this is, finding out, first of all, that you've got all these CIA people, but this is where he comes to it, where he got the instinct to go there. I didn't even know this in advance before I said it, right? He says, you can literally smell it on these people. There's a CIA speak, frenzied energy of a man on cocaine, endless and wholly unaccountable bleeding about democracy, verbal State Department print shop services, and a psycho's lack of remorse. A psycho's lack of remorse. Now, the funny thing is, Stephen King actually writes the same way. His tweets come out the same. You can put these two people in a gang, right? I think it's the same tweet writer that Stephen King has and Rob Reiner has. Now, remember, they made together one of my favorite movies of all time, right? So they were already in partnership, Stephen King and Rob Reiner. And now you see them 30 years later, and they're sounding and talking a lot alike. They might even have the same person who's writing their tweets. We don't know. Stephen King even has a new book out right now. When you're this old and you have this many books out and there's new books coming out all the time, you have to wonder who's writing them all. Is it AI? Is it people? Is it whatever? But the villain in Stephen King's new book is actually a MAGA Republican who I guess dies or something because he didn't get up to date on his vaccines. They're going with that, right? So Stephen King now, the scary people in his stories are like people who don't listen to government advice and get vaccines. Like those are the new crazy villains in his stories. Is that the same Stephen King that wrote It? Is it the same person? Who knows, right? Who knows? But that's what we see happening. So you can see that this advisory board, now there's more to it, right? It's not just that all these CIA directors on it. There's more, right? So here's where we go. Here's where he goes with it. So 4 of the CIA directors serving as advisors to Rob Reiner are also on the board of the Atlantic Council, right? So what's the Atlantic Council? It is one of these big groups that meets sort of tangentially to NATO. It's a big security defense thing. The city of Halifax, Canada, Halifax, Nova Scotia. It's a city on Canada's eastern shore in the Atlantic Ocean, sort of north of Boston. And Halifax has their yearly conference, the Atlantic Council's conference, and it's all these big spy people. It's McCain used to come all the time, and you'd have the Canadian military there, the Canadian Minister of Defense, and you'd have all these different spies that would come in and all that stuff. I've mentioned before that previous to Bitcoin, I was working in the Canadian Senate. And one of the senators, the main senator I worked for, was actually the senator for Halifax. So he used to get invited. He was a spy in a former life. Now he's not involved in any of this kind of stuff. That's for sure, right? But he used to attend this meeting. So just so you know that the some proximity to Atlantic Council that I have, and I've known about this thing for a while. It's a yearly event. So here they are. Here he is, Mike Benz, continuing to talk about the CIA directors that are also on the board of the Atlantic Council, right? So all these guys there. And then finally, he puts this point to tie it all together. Did I mention the Atlantic Council was sponsored by Burisma? What's Burisma? And it signed a Burisma partnership deal. Burisma, of course, as we all know, is the perfect phone call that Trump had that he got impeached for, wondering about what happened with Hunter Biden sitting on the board of Burisma when they had the prosecutor in Ukraine fired, right? So remember, a lot of this stuff is super boring and hard to follow. So I'll just try and, because we get inundated with these stories, right? So remember, Trump got impeached in 2020, just before COVID. The reason he got impeached was they said he was withholding money or some kind of support for Zelensky in Ukraine unless they told them what happened with their former Attorney General Shokin, who was involved in looking after Burisma stuff. So according to Trump and according to many people, the Burisma folks were pressuring the Bidens to get rid of the Attorney General of Ukraine in order to stop this Burisma stuff. Now, it turns out that Burisma is heavily tied to the Atlantic Council and the spy network in America. The story from there goes, right, that, COVID happens and Trump is gone. And now we got this Ukraine war. And the whole time the media was telling you, because this was what Biden said from the beginning, right? This is what always short-circuited Trump's attacks on Burisma, on the Ukraine and Burisma and the Biden connection, was that everybody wanted the Ukrainian HE gone, Shokin. Everybody wanted him gone, they said, right? Oh, Shokin. Everyone agrees. That's what Joe Biden said all the time. Everybody agreed. He's garbage. We got to get him to go, right? He's got to go. So now it turns out, with everything that we're understanding about Shokin and everything that we are seeing play out, it turns out that the story about Shokin being the worst and everyone wanted him to go is a complete scam. It was never that way. Kaneko the Great has the breakdown, and it comes from a Miranda Devine article that she published. So here's what he says. The European Commission praised Ukraine's Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin for his efforts to fight corruption in a December 2015 progress report published 9 days after then VP Joe Biden demanded his ouster. The report flies in the face of Biden's claims that the European Union joined his demands that Shokin be removed for being corrupt and obstructing anti-corruption reforms. Now, remember, the whole thing here was that Joe Biden used it every time. Oh, everybody wanted him gone. Everybody. Oh, yeah, everybody. Everyone's concern in the world was the Attorney General of Ukraine and what they're doing for domestic companies. That was like the big press. I bet you Justin Trudeau was all about it. Canada, all worried. Every country in Europe, they would have been so worried about the Attorney General of Ukraine. Can you name me the Attorney General of one other country? I honestly can't. I can't think. I don't know the name other than the Attorney General of America and Canada. I cannot name one Attorney General on planet Earth, on the planet. And I'm pretty tuned in, right? Now that could be my failure. Who knows? But here's what Kaneko says further, right? The report flies in the face of claims that the European Union joined his demands that Shokin be removed for being corrupt and obstructing anti-corruption reforms. An FBI FD 1023, don't know what that is, form alleges that Burisma Holdings paid VP Joe Biden and his son $5 million bribe each to fire Shokin, who was investigating Hunter's energy company. In a leaked phone conversation between then Ukrainian president and VP Biden, Biden leveraged $1 billion US loan guarantee for the removal of the prosecutor general. Tell me that there is a new government and a new prosecutor general, Biden told them. During the call, Ukraine's president acknowledged that he was firing Shokin despite the fact that he didn't have any corruption charges and don't have any information about him doing something wrong. I asked him to resign. There's an article even today now this weekend, and it comes from from one of these newspapers, MSNBC. I can't remember, but what they're basically saying is no. They're wrong about this. Every single person wanted this person fired. Don't listen to the new fake news that there wasn't demands for him to go and all of these things. And it turns out that so if you go and read the article, they don't cite anyone. They just say diplomats. Now imagine they can't get a single diplomat whose job it is to agree with the majority take or to agree with the American or the consensus diplomatic community's take. The consensus diplomatic community's take, according to the Bidens, is that everyone wanted Shokin gone. So why can't they find one diplomat to come on record and say, we wanted him done. It's for sure, right? Now they just say that these are unnamed diplomat sources, and then the whole article just churns fake names. So you can see the fingerprints of Operation Mockingbird right in this story. Operation Mockingbird, of course, being the operation that you heard about in the Church Commission in the 1970s, which was all about CIA and national security infiltration of American news media, not just news media, the MK Ultra piece being a component, being how to subvert Hollywood and those messages in service to this propagandistic system. So now here's Scott Adams talking about this exact thing where he said, right, the dog not barking, that's what he calls this, the dog not barking, right? So when you hear a dog not barking, something's up, right? And he says, the dog not barking method of understanding reality is highly effective. Dog not barking equals press didn't do a fact check when Biden said everyone wanted Shokin fired. That's how you know it was never real. this is like the fine people hoax. You know, there were non-racists in attendance in Charlottesville supporting statues, right? As Trump said, because no one except him, Scott Adams, tried to find someone and talk to them. Scott Adams did do that after Charlottesville, by the way. He invited a person who was absolutely anti-Trump, totally pro. Don't want to speak too much for these people, but anti-Trump, wouldn't have been Trump voters. They just had some kind of reason to want the statues to stay, or for historical purposes or whatever. Now, I'm not a statue guy, right? I don't mind tearing these stupid statues down. Doesn't bother me in the least. I get why some people want to keep them up for historical preservation and all that stuff, but it just doesn't matter to me. So when but I can understand why some people would want to keep them. I get it, right? I also get it. So, so this story then became very quickly one about really not looking into the details, right? No one looked into the details about Charlottesville. No one looked into the details about Shokin. It took years. I didn't even think about it. I didn't even think about it once, though. Everyone wanted them gone. Okay. And I follow this stuff every day just to show you how powerful these techniques really are, right? Think about it. I'm aware of Project Mockingbird. I'm aware of how the system works. I was as close to the metal as you can get. I've been a Bitcoiner for 10 years. And still I got easily rolled on this, easily rolled. Now, not to say that I ever trusted the Bidens on it, but just the narrative that everyone wanted Shokin fired, and then that confused the condition and the calculus that Trump had, that easily manipulated me, right? It took a couple of years and investigations and people looking into it credibly and to reframe the entire question, right? Did they ever really want this guy fired? Like, who even knows the AG of Ukraine? Who cares about a pitiful little country like Ukraine and then their AG? It's absolutely immaterial to anything that's going on in America unless you have some reason to be there, like Burisma, right? Which is what we saw. But the capacity of this Mockingbird thing, here on 9/11, right? I was on Twitter this morning. What do you see everywhere, right? Remember, 9/11 gathered all Americans together and put us all on the same page, right? Osama bin Laden, bad. Jihad, fundamentalists, bad, right? Now, Cernovich was talking a bit about 9/11 in his tweets today, and here's what he says. So he says that he more or less thinks that what happened on 9/11 is, sort of accurate-ish. So here's what he says. I think the official explanation of 9/11 is mostly accurate, but that there is some sketchy stuff that deserves being questioned. And post-COVID, WMDs in Iraq, Russiagate, only a fool would trust the government. Ask all those questions. The regime deserves no trust. He says, I think the official explanation is mostly accurate, again, and that there's some sketchy stuff, and people should question the official explanation given the WMDs in Iraq and the Iraq Live. Here he says that post 9/11, and there was a lot of Muslim hate, which I remember, right? No doubt about it. I think for 10 years, I was saying, oh, jihad is different. You got to, jihad is existential threat, that kind of thing, right? That kind of story. And it took me years to realize how much of the brainwashing was even affecting me, right? Now, I wasn't out there saying, go attack Iraq. I was against Iraq, right? I didn't see the connection, but still, I thought ISIS, whoa, they're the crazy army of jihadists are creating a caliphate. Oh no, right? They're all over Europe too. What's going to happen? Little did I know that I had been brainwashed the entire time. It took me Bitcoin to get out of what had happened and to start actually getting some clarity on 9/11. Now, we still don't have answers. I still just know what I should doubt and what sources I should doubt. And I have the fingerprints of this kind of brainwashing that I can now recognize and that I'm able to give myself some distance from, right? Doesn't mean there aren't dangers in the Middle East. Doesn't mean there aren't really crazy jihadis, right? For sure they are, for sure. But I've been to the Middle East enough to know, and I went in the years immediately after 9/11 to know that the boiler that they were describing over there was just not true, right? It took some time, but we all got there. Not all of us, but we managed to get there. So here's what Cernovich says about that whole time. He says, post 9/11, and it was a lot of Muslim hate, Patriot Act, and then somehow Iraq got invaded. It was a gullible era. We voted Trump in 2016 to atone for these grave sins. Now, the Patriot Act is being used to send patriots to the gulag. Ron Paul warned us all. He says, America was a much more gullible country back then. A lot of guys, especially younger ones, idealized bygone eras. I don't miss it. I remember post 9/11, and it was a lot of Muslim hate, Patriot Act, and then somehow they got invaded. Again, Cernovich says, I see 9/11 differently from most. Far too many people wonder why we don't have unity like back then. Brothers and sisters use that unity to murder 500,000 Iraqi civilians and destroy Libya. It's better we are divided. The country did great evil. God forgive us. And indeed, I think that's where we're at, right? I think a reckoning of 9/11, I think a reckoning of most of the stuff is where most Americans are at. That's why we often look, I've mentioned RFK's path to victory many times, and it's one most Bitcoiners would recognize, right? RFK is going for the following approach, and I think his polling has shown it, and I think he believes he can do it this way. That's why you don't see him taking on crazy tactics to go after Trump and all this stuff, right? I think RFK has realized that as long as someone tells the truth, that there's enough appetite out there for people to just want to find out one way or the other what happened on 9/11, one way or the other. And they want to find out about that. They want to find out about his uncle, his dad. They want to find out how deep the rabbit hole of Mockingbird and MK Ultra and all of this stuff goes. I think most Americans are there now. And if it's not most Americans, the curiosity can be aroused in the rest, and I think you're going to have continue to have an appetite for it. Because if it's not that, right, what are we going to get? We've got Joe Biden yesterday trying to give a speech, and none of it made any sense again, right? His mind is completely gone, and I don't think he's going to leave. He's got to protect his own corruption and his son. So there was a quote, a tweet from Gavin Newsom this weekend where he's underlining that he's out of time. Basically, he's got to file papers to run, and he doesn't really acknowledge much of what's going on with the Biden administration. Doesn't look like they're going to give him time. It looks like it's only going to be RFK who's on the ballot, which is not going to be and Kamala, I guess, which is not going to be a great thing for the Dems, because remember what I think you get with a RFK Trump situation is a competition for who has the moral right to destroy Mockingbird and the deep state and CIA. I mean, which one has the mandate more? They tried to modern assassinate Trump by destroying his name, destroying his reputation, and they destroyed all of RFK's family. So which one has the greater right to destroy these things? That's a question that I leave up to every individual. And I couldn't answer that for you. I think I can't decide who has the greater moral case to destroy the CIA if they get the power to do so and win the presidency. But here's what Joe Biden is actually saying, right? He's saying, this is what he said this weekend. The Indian looks at John Wayne and points to the Union soldier. And he's mumbling to a point where you can't even understand it, right? He goes, the Indian looks at John Wayne and points to the Union soldier, and he says, he's a lying dog-faced pony soldier. Well, there's a lot of lying and dog-faced pony soldiers out there about global warming. You got to hear it. I mean, he doesn't have 5 brain cells left. He doesn't have 5 brain cells left. And that there's no one actually out there trying to say, run someone else. I think that is, again, the dog not barking, right? We can all tell that this man is not in charge. This is not the leader of the free world. I continue to think that title, leader of the free world, is one of the things that's going to help us defeat Mockingbird. They created this persona for the president, and they stuck Joe Biden into it. There isn't enough MSNBC propaganda in the world to make this make sense. There just isn't enough. So, you get the 9/11 story, you get Rob Reiner, where we can see confirmed, this is an Operation Mockingbird asset. You see what's going on with the media and pushing the Shokin lie, pushing the Ukrainian story, the complete disassociative state that they have with Trump, right? That continues to be, I think, one of the more important things. But it goes a little further in that we saw another Operation Mockingbird asset just put their hand up this weekend, and I confirmed I'm a Operation Mockingbird asset, and that's Jake Tapper. Now, we've known Jake Tapper as one of the most evil people in the business of news. Evil, like not I got it wrong, I disagree with you in your opinions, none of that stuff. He's evil. How do we know he's evil? Well, here's what he did, right? So this is from Mario Nawfal, right? So he has Blinken, Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, who's negotiating on our behalf. Blinken, that guy, right? He's Blinken. So Blinken goes on Jake Tapper's CNN, right? And what do they say? What do you think he says? Right? Well, here's what he says. So CNN has asked for repercussions against Elon Musk, saying he sabotaged a military operation by Ukraine. And by the way, Walter Isaacson, the biographer, actually went on Lex Friedman this weekend because I think he realized he got used. So Isaacson, the person who's writing the article, because the whole thing that they tried to trap Elon on was the deactivating the internet for the assault into the sea and an attack on the Russian Navy in the Crimean Sea. So I did not say Abe Lincoln. Or maybe I did, but I didn't mean to. So the story goes from there that Blinken goes on CNN, right, and they're talking about the drone attack, right? So I'll go back. The Walter Isaacson on Lex Friedman, again, reiterating he didn't turn them off. He just didn't activate them in the first place, right? Because it's a civilian tool. It's not a military tool. Elon's already talking about how he is building a tool for the U.S. military that is Starlink, but not the same, right? So it's a bespoke version. That would be, no, he said a Blinken, yeah. A Blinken. There you go. A Blinken. So the Walter Isaacson reiterated again, right? Because I think some people understand at what level this war is now operating on, right? So we're already there. Robin and Men in Tights reference. It was a good movie, Men in Tights. I was a fan. Haven't seen it in years. So then Blinken goes on CNN to talk about this whole Starlink support and debate that happened, right? Where there was clear lying last week, right? Deactivate and refuse to activate are not the same scenario. One paints the picture of the Ukrainians running into battle and all of a sudden they have no cell coverage. That's the picture they're trying to paint. The phone's broke. Retreat. Instead, it was we're just not going to do this, right? So it's not the same story. So here's what happens, right? So he goes on to the show. Blinken goes on to Jake Tapper's CNN show, and Tapper starts leading Blinken down a road that looks like they're trying to set up repercussions and promote violence against Elon Musk. This is what they say, right? Elon refuses to directly participate in war, and CNN calls it sabotage, right? The U.S. Secretary of State responds to Jake Tapper by ignoring his allegations and pointing out the benefits of Starlink that brought the Ukrainian people, right? Tapper dismisses Blinken's reply since it doesn't criticize Elon and moves to a new stupid agenda. Elon's secret talks with senior Russian officials, claiming Elon is doing his own diplomatic outreach to the Russian government. Blinken again ignores the stupid question and again highlights how important and impactful Starlink has been to Ukraine. And guess how Tapper wraps up the interview? It sounds like Starlink is so important the U.S. government doesn't want to risk offending a capricious billionaire. Could you imagine? So this is an Operation Mockingbird thing. And it looks like, correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like they're trying to go after, not just sully his reputation. This looks like they're trying to get him caught up in national security. This looks like they're trying to promote hatred and violence towards Elon. That's what I see, right? And here, Biden administration has a history of attacking Elon, right? There are multiple bogus investigations against his companies right now. The Glass House thing that they're investigating at the SEC. the hiring process stuff, right? So it's looking more and more like they want him out of there, or at least totally shut down. So Cernovich mentions Jake Tapper is scum of the earth. This is why it disgusts me when conservatives go, wow, go Jake, when he says something normal, which is rare, right? So he says, stop being this way. This is the best, the best take on this, though. It comes from Glenn Greenwald. Because, people who are really good writers, like Glenn Greenwald, right? He's an excellent writer. And because he's such a good writer, he's able to capture these things, I think, a little more accurately, or just funny. So here's what he says. Right, he comes out and he says, "Let me get it." He comes out and he says, "I was unaware of the legal obligation which requires all private citizens and businesses to act in immediate, complete, and unthinking alignment with U.S. government's foreign policy goals, and to immediately obey all war requests from U.S. allies." I was unaware. I was unaware of the legal obligation, right? Oh, I was unaware. So from there, you can see Mockingbird working today, right? It's not just the Rob Reiner, which harkens back to everything we've seen, which harkens back to infiltration of Wall Street, which I think gives a useful frame for what happened on 9/11, right? And again, the thermal, remember the official explanation continues to be for the Tower 7 thermal expansion, right? That's the official thing, right? That the news will just go on along with. So if you think about that, right? If you think about that, this is the actual thermal expansion quote. This comes from Disclosed TV. 22 years ago, the World Trade Center collapsed after 2 planes hit the buildings in NYC. A third building, World Trade Center 7, with 81 vertical steel columns that was not hit by a plane, collapsed due to a new phenomenon called thermal expansion. Maybe, maybe. I'm not an engineer, so I don't know. The story is, we've been able to perceive Operation Mockingbird over a series of decades now. We've seen them involved in every major story, and it goes so far as to looking into the tweets that Hollywood type agents are delivering on Twitter to help set the agenda and help frame and manipulate discussions. And it's going so far that you actually have a journalist like Jake Tapper trying to lure a government official into agreeing with him on air that someone like Elon Musk needs to be dealt with because they aren't dealing with the US military in a fair way, right? They're actually exercising their own rights. So you can think of that. Then you get MSNBC saying right here, right, this is Mockingbird in operation today, right? Why, this is a headline, why a Twitter whistleblower is joining the Biden administration. This new hire by the Biden administration may be a stroke of genius, right? Because what they argue for in the article is, look, X is now an enemy of the state. You're hiring someone who knows how it works on the inside. They're going to be able to help push back against the disinformation coming out of X. I mean, unbelievably, they just come out and say it straight up, right? They're just coming out to say it straight up. So the story between Tapper, the story with Rob Reiner, and the story with Elon gets even more amazing when you think of the effectiveness of that community notes piece and how much that has actually thrown a wrench into the plans of Operation Mockingbird. And you can see it because Operation Mockingbird's new pivot is to hire these TikTok kids, the Chris Mowry, right? Who's always like fixing his hair and he's like, so guys, the thing about Biden is he's going to do all this great stuff. It's so great. That guy, the guy on TikTok. So now when he does these TikTok things about how great Biden is, Community Notes on X actually kicks in and says that his talent agency is paid, and that this post is a paid post from the DNC. So it doesn't look like Mockingbird is going to evolve much more, because it looks like this Chris Mowry guy is supposed to be the future of Mockingbird. He ain't no Jake Tapper, and he ain't no Rob Reiner, right? At least with Rob Reiner, look, I get why you'd go after a guy like Rob Reiner. He's capable of making one of the most beautiful films ever. His brain is better. He's more persuasive, more manipulative than a guy like Chris Mowry, this guy, right? It's not even on the same planet. It's like going to try and hire an actor to do Mockingbird when they're low IQ, right? Most of the actors aren't even aware Mockingbird is happening. It's a director thing, right? There are some actors who you'd want to go out and get for sure if they have enough brain cells, but Chris Mowry looks like they're going with the actors now. They're going with like the Chris Evans Captain America approach, right? It ain't gonna fly. It ain't gonna work. So with that in mind, right, you've got, I think, an inability for these forces to continue to push things forward. And you can see it because one of the story in New Mexico, right? New Mexico. So did anyone catch what happened in New Mexico this weekend? It's one of the most amazing stories ever. And it can only happen if you try to really pipe into people's brains with mass media and all of those things. But it looked like this was a complete failure. So in New Mexico this weekend, they tried to pause. Guess what they tried to do? Pause the Second Amendment. So technically, I'll have a conversation this afternoon with a friend of mine who lives in New Mexico. He and I program the Bitcoin Magazine shows together. You probably all know him, Alex McShane. He's a regular listener of the show. He's got another show coming up at the top of this hour with Q. Remember Q from Bitcoin Magazine as well? Q and Alex McShane do a show called Q&A. Q&A, question and answer about Bitcoin. They're going to answer 21 million questions about Bitcoin. It's a good show. I've been watching it. You can catch it on their YouTube channel and Rumble Q&A. And I think they go live on Nostr, and you can give them the zaps and all that stuff. I still haven't got that Nostr live stream figured out exactly the way I want. It keeps failing. It keeps destroying my Rumble feed for some reason, so I don't really know what's going on with that. But anyway, he lives in New Mexico, so I'm going to find out what New Mexicans say. But what I can tell already is that everyone's laughing at this New Mexico situation, and no one is going to comply. The sheriffs, the police, everyone is telling the governor in New Mexico, get bent. It ain't happening. So New Mexico looks like they tried for this, and it just ain't gonna hunt, right? So Joshua Dunn says they are coming for your children and guns. Recent events in New Mexico and California show that they are in fact coming for your children and your guns. The children part, maybe, but the gun part is what I'm looking at here. New Mexico Governor Michelle Grissom's executive order banning both open carry and concealed carry permits in Albuquerque demonstrates the left has a complete disregard for basic constitutional rights. So we'll see, but it's looking like that's what's going on here. So there you go. Did you see the Woody Harrelson clip on a superpower invading a country? I didn't see the clip of Woody Harrelson, but I've seen Woody Harrelson on the Saturday Night Live thing, right? I think we did a show about it. I think we did that last year. That would have been last autumn when he used his opening monologue to attack the pharmaceutical companies. So I think Woody Harrelson is not one of those agents, but hard to trust anyone right now, right? All right, let's see. Got some comments here. The New Pearl Harbor is the documentary on 9/11, which belies the official story. I'll check that out, Robert. I've been looking for good stuff to watch, and I'm looking for that tonight for sure. We like 9/11 stuff. Brainless Biden is leader of the feebly minded sheeple of the Mockingbird Meadows grazing. It's a bit like that. Yeah, it really is. How do we share TikTok from the front line now? How indeed? Just 1 second. Okay. Anyone still scoffs at conspiracy theories that going shit like that are beyond my ability to reach. Yeah, you can't, like, if someone is, we talk about that all the time. There is a limit to who you can sort of discuss. In my upcoming book, the Bitcoiner's Guide, or the Bitcoiner's NPC Management Handbook, there's a threshold that I get into, like who you can bother with and who you can't. So that's there, right? That is definitely there. Yeah, I got to find this New Pearl Harbor thing. Yeah, radical Islam is no longer an existential threat, but overbearing anti-terrorism measures like the Patriot Act still very much. Yeah. So my basic conclusion about this is exactly what you're saying, Jebby. It's this simple. Where did they go? Where did they go? Where did the terrorists go? Where did the jihadis go? On actual day of 9/11, right? I said, okay, This is going to be days now. This is war here. And if it was exactly as they said, why did they stop at a couple of airplanes? You know how many bridges? Like one car with explosives and the bridge is gone. Train tracks. Like, why stop? They could have kept going. So already I was suspicious, honestly, that nothing else happened that day, that it was just that stuff. And then nothing else happened for weeks and days. That was actually, you almost wanted a bad thing to happen because it proved that we were actually at war and not in a psychological war made by our own prison keepers. That I was sort of worried about that at the time. And with ISIS, for example, where did they go? Does Trump beat them all? Trump beat all of them? They're all gone? They're just gone? I don't know. It looks a lot like Black Lives Matter. It's a button you can turn on and off. It's simply a thing that if it has a button that you can control and you can turn it on and off, okay, well, now they need it, now they don't, right? Now, I'm absolutely not saying there aren't jihadis in the world who want to destroy America. But if you look at the overall sense last time that America was the big Satan, right? 22 years ago, we were like, what are you talking about? Now we're like, yeah. It's a big Satan for sure. So things have changed so much. And our ability to be literate in what has changed is also increased. And because we do have the capacity now to understand the incentive structures that come with printable money, that come with fiat, and that come with the words spoken by the government as the basis for the system. That's what fiat is. Remember, fiat doesn't mean money. It means declarations. It means words, right? It's dictation. It's passive dictation. And so if you actually make that the foundation of your system, well, that's what you're going to get. And a lot of us Bitcoiners have understood just how screwed up incentive models can get and just how bad things can get. Now, this doesn't, to me, it doesn't have to be a small group of people coordinating all this. It still looks like systemic misplacement of incentive structure so that the managerial class that erupted to win World War II and grew inside of our state is just interested in self-preservation now. I think they really do think, I mean, honestly, they do think they're doing the right thing. They just don't understand the cost benefit analysis has never even come across their viewpoint, right? What have we given up with the Patriot Act? Everything. We gave up everything. For what? So that a couple of jihadis can't make it to the country, but also they can just enter the southern border now without any scrutiny. Like, that's what it was all for. The Patriot Act was supposed to be to keep them out of the country. And now we have an open border, like a straight open border, right? So it was never true. It just couldn't have been true. 9/11 Mockingbird's masterpiece. Yeah, it was a very powerful work. Yeah, very, very powerful. Very persuasive. And luckily, so I had been working in a factory in Montreal a little around that time, and with a bunch of Romanians, and they taught me basically everything you need to know about the fall of the Russian communism and what they learned about and all of that stuff. And they were already of the mind back then that 9/11 was a scam. And so, I had heard it from day one. I'd heard it, right? I'd heard it from day one. So there you go. The irony is that the U.S. government response to 9/11 and the decade after created more real or radicalized individuals. Absolutely. 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 How does Nostr fit in with Bitcoin going big time socially scenario? Yeah, I mean, it teaches people Bitcoin. That's what I like, right? It teaches people that the client server model doesn't exactly work. So it's like a physical introduction to the physical network of Bitcoin. Remember, well, a family got west of Mississippi River that day because we knew the bridges had to be next. Yeah, that's what I mean, Joseph. Like, how did it stop at just the Twin Towers? How? Like, why? Why wouldn't you keep doing it for days? If this was a real war, you could have kept doing it for days and days and days. So there you go. Cantor Fitzgerald is a wild piece. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, they really are. And something about to the Chinese, that's what it looks like on that $1 trillion bond in the building. Yeah. DNA identified 2 lost souls 22 years later. Yeah. All right, team. That's all I got for today. But, I think the point is I don't think Mockingbird can, I mean, that's the theme. Mockingbird's grounded. I don't think they can pull this kind of thing again. Like the Ukraine thing ain't going to hunt, right? And I think enough again, when you hear people talk about the Great Reset of a couple hundred years ago and they wonder why all of the beautiful buildings are mental institutes, that's probably all they can do. Right? They got to throw everyone into mental institutes and kill a bunch of other people. Also filled with asbestos. Was it really? I don't know if I buy the whole asbestos thing anyway. I still know people in my area. Asbestos is a town in Quebec, and it all came from Quebec. So we have way more asbestos than most people. Did you guys know that asbestos is the name of an actual village in Quebec? Yeah, where the big asbestos mines are. And asbestos is the name of the town. And a lot of places, and I'm not saying asbestos isn't, like, I think asbestositis is a real thing, right? It's totally a real thing. But there's all kinds of farmer types where I'm from that say, yeah, I use asbestos and I'm 90 years old and fine. No, I'm not saying go use asbestos at all. At all. It's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is, who knows? Who knows? I bet you asbestositis is a real thing. You can totally die of it. But, even in Wizard of Oz, the snow that falls, that's all pure asbestos. They just drop pure asbestos on them. Now, a lot of health problems of the people in the movie Wizard of Oz, but my family comes from asbestos. Yeah, there you go. Where do I say? It's a town. Asbestos is a town in Quebec. It's a town in Quebec. What happened in 1971? We got to get what happened in 64 going, though. That's also important. All right, team. That's all I got for today. I shall see y'all tomorrow. Have a great day. Have a great day, everyone. And if you're in New York, I have been to the 9/11 memorial on 9/11 in New York at night, and it's one of the most beautiful things you can do. I love watching those shining towers shoot into the sky. And I remember boating away from the memorial a few years ago when I lived in New York, and I was going back to the Rockaways because I was still in my summer place, and you could see them right all the way out into the ocean. It was really neat. Really, really cool. All right, team. See you tomorrow.